Hi, welcome to Tynwald in Brief. I'm Siobhán, one of the journalists up at Manx Radio, and I'm joined this time by Sports Editor Rob Pritchard, who, well, you were kind of Tynwald editor this week. You've been down in the chamber listening along. Can you run me through some of the main things that were discussed this week?
So there were plenty of aspects, I suppose, for members to consider, given the fact that it was the first sitting of the court back from the annual 3-month recess. A lot of work goes on behind the scenes going into these sittings, and of course plenty of big topics that have been very much in the public interest have come up in that time, and it probably wasn't surprising that the first items coming up on the question time section were relating to urgent matters around the Tesco purchase of Shoprite stores and the upcoming transition that Tesco and Shoprite will be going through. These questions were put forward by a couple of members and all directed towards the Chief Minister, and numerous aspects of this particular situation were brought up, whereby not just what the impact is going to be on local suppliers, which has been a concern for the likes of residents and businesses on the island, but also some of the other factors that require something like this to go through and all the infrastructure behind it, such as accreditation, the availability and cost, and also around competition and what is actually going to be available for those who may be competing with Tesco in the long run once that transition goes through.
So yeah, there was lots of discussion then around Shoprite, and a lot of that is kind of still up in the air. It's obviously a very new situation. It was a business deal, so government obviously have given us the information they can at this stage. That's definitely one to watch. Another big topic that's been in the news a lot recently, we've all covered it quite extensively, is the steam packet. There's obviously an ongoing dispute there between the trade union and the company. Lots of questions about this. Can you run me through sort of what went on there?
Well, there are 11 questions overall, just solely focused on matters around the steam packet company, and some of them centred around the likes of the ongoing disputes you've already alluded to between the steam packet company and the Nautilus Union, but it was also with regards to the vessels as well, the likes of employment and financing, several different aspects to consider. There was another put forward by Douglas South MHK Claire Christian as well about how many times in each of the last 3 years the Ben Macri and the Manannan has been unable to dock at its destination, has had to return to its port of departure. We have seen that with regards to weather conditions and other factors that affect the steam packet vessels. It's certainly not an old subject, but I think something that they wanted to bring up in this time, particularly now that the fact that we do have that new vessel, the Manxman, in there, and particularly with regards to the dispute between the steam packet company and the Nautilus Union. I think there were questions for the Chief Minister almost clarifying where government's position was on that matter, and there were two things that the Chief Minister wanted to try and emphasise quite a lot, is the fact that the steam packet company remains arm's length from the government as well, even though it is government owned as well. And with regards to the actual ongoing situation with the dispute, he feels as the Chief Minister that government is not doesn't feel the need and isn't required to directly interfere with that process. They want that to be the remit of the steam packet board and the company as a whole, and between the union themselves. So the Chief Minister's message very much seemed to be that while it is a government-owned company, they are looking to they have faith in the way that the steam packet board is dealing with this situation, and also Nautilus Union as well. They want to see those two parties coming together. They don't want government interfering in that situation.
And like you mentioned earlier, Rob, as well, this was the first sitting after the summer recess. So whilst those two topics, kind of dominated proceedings over the last 2 days, we had several other topics that, were spoken about in detail by the people who brought forward the question, but also they were concluded quite succinctly. So, for example, we heard about Castle Ruffin High School and the development there. Onshore wind farm sites has been another big topic that we've had in the news recently. Provision around menopause. We had quite a few different other questions that did come up. But in terms of dominating the time that we were listening across, we had a lot of discussions around homelessness as well. Now, we had several questions about homelessness of people of no fixed abode in police custody and within the criminal system. And so that's definitely another hot topic that our lawmakers want to draw attention to.
Indeed, and I suppose it fits hand in hand with the announcement that did come out of government regarding the draft homelessness strategy going forward over the next few years. And there was also, outside of questions, there was a motion put forward by Onchan MHK Rob Callister that was then amended by Douglas North MHK David Ashford. That amended motion passed through the court, and it was looking at the idea of what provisions would be there for those who do find themselves in a homeless situation. And David Ashford, some of his comments centred around with the original motion regarding the idea of having a night shelter in place to to help those who may not have a roof over their head. And some of David Ashford's comments centred around that while a night shelter in itself could be a tool, is it necessarily the silver bullet to help these people who may be struggling to nail down accommodation through whatever circumstances? So maybe looking at other ideas around that as well. And I think particularly, as I've just mentioned, with the draft homelessness strategy being announced and to be considered in the future, it is certainly a topic to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and you caught up with David Ashford after the sitting as well, so we'll have more on that in Manx Radio Breakfast programme this week. So moving on then to today, some more legislation was tabled, more things presented to the court. For example, Home Affairs Minister Jane Peel-Wilson brought forward the Garnier report, which looks into legal services on the Isle of Man. We've had extensive reporting on this in the last few weeks when it was tabled on the Register of Business, but can you just run me through what the mood was in the room today regarding that report?
Well, with the way that the Justice and Home Affairs Minister summed things up, I think it's fair to say, with the 32 recommendations that were put in Lord Garnier's report, is the fact that they welcome the findings of Lord Garnier as well, and also there seemed to be a tone really calling for action on these matters going forward as well. We did also hear some comments from the Attorney General as well, who welcomed the situation, and he spoke about the idea of how government can work with the Isle of Man Law Society to start to move things forward. And there were a couple of comments early on about how certain things were being actioned already in certain areas that might or might not relate to those recommendations, and there was a suggestion made by one member of the court that was it a bit of a knee-jerk reaction to the recommendations in this report coming out, and there was some disagreement with that. There was some saying that yes, we are pressing forward with this, but it is not just in response to this particular report. And I think that with the amount of recommendations that are in there, there'll be a lot of work to come, but the overall mood in terms of the way that the report, what the report highlighted, and the way the government itself wants to move forward on this matter with the likes of the Isle of Man Law Society was quite positive, but certainly a feeling that I think action will speak louder than words. That's what I took from it.
Definitely, and one thing that jumped out for me as well was the idea of keeping an eye on how people in the legal profession are trained elsewhere, so in England and Wales, and potentially bringing in apprenticeship schemes here. So it'd be very interesting to watch to see how in the next couple of years that might change for us here on the Isle of Man. And then moving on from the sort of normal day-to-day proceedings of Tynwald, today ended with the Bishop addressing the court. It was his final sitting in the role. He's retiring at the end of the month. So, you know, we had some lovely comments addressed to him, and then he addressed the court himself. What was the mood like in the room when he gave that statement? Because listening in from here, it was very heartfelt, and, you know, it sounded at the end like MHK is quite touched by what he said.
It certainly, that's the impression that I got being sat in there, is that the Lord Bishop's closing comments, shall we call them, to the Tynwald court were very much from the heart, and very constructive and very concise as well, and very assured in the way he delivered those. And there was certainly an appreciation for the final messages he had, if you want to call them that, to the court as well. And that drew upon, of course, the 6 years of experience that he's had in the role. He's not quite done in his role yet as he goes towards retirement, but that, as you rightly pointed out, was his last sitting in the Tynwald chamber. And the fact that there was one particular quote that I believe the president of Tynwald, Lawrence Skelly, made when a lot of people have described the Lord Bishop as this moral compass. And whilst there is a lot of facts and details that naturally have to be applied within the court with regards to all these different subjects, sometimes when it comes to ethical and moral grounds, I think the message that the president of Tynwald was trying to get across first and foremost is that when there are moral and ethical considerations to be had, he is seen as a wise and knowledgeable voice that people can not just hear from but also talk to.
Absolutely, and obviously his position in the court has been up to a lot of debate in recent months. So we'll see how that goes going forward. But he left members with two thoughts, really. He said, remember the responsibility and the weight of the responsibility you carry, and make time for oneself. So we'll leave it there, and we'll check back in next month after our next Tynwald sitting.